My reflections this morning really focused on the first reading. Just some thoughts to think about. As St. John is writing, he says, I am writing to you, children. I am writing to you, fathers. I am writing to you, young men. And then he goes back again and says, I write to you, children. I write to you, fathers. I write to you, young men. Different tenses, and I'm not sure exactly what that all means in the Greek, because I didn't look it up. And I don't speak Greek anyways, so I'd have to look up commentaries. But obviously, there is some sort of a different meaning with this, different tense, and so there's a purpose. And he's writing, and some commentators think that this is about the ages of the people, meaning children, fathers, young men. Others think it's spiritual maturity, and where the children are, they're just starting out, but they're beautiful and innocent like children. Fathers, people who have great wisdom, and young men, they have the energy and zest for life. Who knows? I encourage you to take this scripture, pray with it, ponder over it, read through it, maybe read a commentary or two on it. But just enter in and let God speak to your heart. One of the lines that struck me was, I write to you, children, because you know the Father. And 3 times it talks about knowing the Father or knowing God in this short section that St. John is talking about. And we want to remember, knowledge in the Scriptures is always an intimate, personal knowledge. Not knowing about someone, but having a close, intimate relationship with them. Then after this part, he gets into saying, remember, do not love the world or the things of the world. Now, I remember Bishop Sheen speaking about making sure to make the distinction that the Scripture makes between the world and worldliness. God so loved the world. He created the world. So it's not that the world in and of itself is bad. But the worldliness is what St. John is telling us to fight against. Not to be tied down to the things of this world, the things that make other than God a priority. And he talks about these 3 things: sensual lust, enticement for the eyes, and a pretentious life, or in the traditional translation and understanding of it, the concupiscence of the flesh, concupiscence of the eyes, and the pride of life. Now, this big word, concupiscence, we may have heard it used before. It means not just a desire, but a disordered desire. And so a disordered desire would mean we have a desire to eat. Our desire to eat is good. Our desire to eat is a wonderful thing. A disordered desire is that we go and we just mange. That we, when we maybe sit down to dinner, we eat. Not to fill, but to overflowing. And so that's where it's a disordered. When our desires, instead of turning outwards towards God, towards others, turn inward. And so the concupiscence of the flesh he's warning us about is that disordered desire towards pleasure. Now, in case you didn't know, it's not a bad thing to like pleasure. It's a good thing. God made it. Pleasure is good. But when we turn that in on ourselves with food, and we're turning it towards ourselves in a selfish thing, we're going only to the point of wanting to eat for the pleasure of the food. And that taken to extreme becomes the ancient Romans, where they would eat and eat and eat. Then they would go to the vomitorium, throw it all up so they could continue eating and eating and eating again because they enjoyed so much eating. Now that, of course, is an extreme. But we look at that. Or sexual pleasure is a good thing because it's focused on the union between a husband and a wife. But when it turns in on itself, then it's I'm using you, or even my own self, for my own selfish pleasure. And so this concupiscence of the flesh is that grasping after pleasure. This concupiscence of the eyes is looking at possessions, the things of this world. I want. And allowing that to dominate our lives. And then the pride of life is seeking after honor, glory, wanting to be liked, being seen highly in the eyes of others, wanting to be recognized. These three things, the concupiscence of the flesh, concupiscence of the eyes, and the pride of life, he's referring back to what happened with Eve when she looked at that fruit and saw that it was good. And it was good, but she wanted to grasp at it. And so St. John is reminding us here today, don't be caught into this in the world. The world and its enticements are passing away, he says. For whoever does the will of the Father remains forever. He says, don't cling to the worldliness of this world. Don't turn your desires in on yourself, but let them be the rocket fuel that gets us into the heart of the Father. And that's the point I want to close in on. And that is the direction we're all supposed to be going is not holding to the world where everything is going to be dying and being taken from us, but going into the heart of the Father. And I'm going back to something that I said earlier. I write to you, children, because you know the Father. This intimate knowing that we're called, as it were, to enter into that intimate relationship with the Father, to be sitting on His lap, as it were, as His beloved children, letting Him hold us close to His heart, letting Him draw us into Him. And really, I think the only way that we can be broken free from those concupiscences and that pride of life is when we have something to replace it, and that is the love of the Father, where we allow Him to come and by His love to transform our desires from being focused inward on self to be focused in on His love.